Welcome, gather round the fireside and listen to a tale of Fionn McCool, Cú Chulainn, Deirdre of the Sorrows, Gráinne Wail. From giants right down to fairies, of both the drooping and solitary, and those who are sometimes scary. Anything goes by the fireside. Yeah. Fireside, the Puka fireside, the Marrow fireside. Kings and queens fighting heroes, don't you run from the fun, there's no need to hide. Sit by the fireside. Fireside.
Hello and welcome to Fireside, the Irish storytelling podcast. Each episode of Fireside we take a story from folklore and mythology, retell it, have a chat about the tale itself and about the craft, culture and history of storytelling. My name is Kevin C. Olahan. I am your host and your Fireside Bard. Welcome to episode 58 of Fireside, the Irish storytelling podcast. 58 episodes. We are coming to you as always from the beautiful surroundings of the Head Stuff podcast network here in Dublin. It's fantastic to be coming to you once again on this crisp and very, very cold winter's morning, which may be a morning, an evening, it may even be a summertime by the time you're listening to this. But we are here again and we are in the Táin. We are in the Ulster cycle, in the greatest story of Irish mythology. This is part 5. This is 58, part 5. It's all getting very, very convoluted. A few things... Beg your pardon, a few things before we crack on with the story. If this is your first time listening, I highly doubt it is that you'd have jumped into 58 part 5 as your first time. But if it is, certainly go back to the start of the Táin, if not the start of episode 1, to see what we're building up to over a year now at this stage. If you're a returning listener, thank you so much for your continued support. You can please do continue to subscribe or follow us, leave ratings, reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. The reviews and ratings, they do all make a difference. Follow me on Instagram at Fireside Bard. It's the best way of keeping in touch with me and for keeping up to date with what I'm doing. And if you really, really love it, you can of course always subscribe to the Patreon, patreon.com/Fireside Podcast. So we are in part 5 of the Táin. This is Ferdia at the ford. This is very much the climax of the story. It's probably the most famous aspect of the most famous part of the most famous story of Irish mythology. And that is the fight between Cú Chulainn and his best friend Ferdia. And I'm not going to give anything else away. We'll chat more afterwards about the story, about what I've been up to over the past week or so. But this is Ferdia at the ford on Fireside. The Táin, Part 5. The armies of Queen Maeve of Connaught lay in ruins. She had sent warrior after warrior to fight Cú Chulainn in single combat, and every one she had sent had been slain like kittens in the jaws of the Hound of Ulster. And when Cú Chulainn had been sent into a healing slumber for 3 days by his father, Lú Lámhada, the boys' troop of Ulster came to their brother's aid. But when the Hound awoke and discovered his brothers in arms had met their end at the hands of the collected armies of the 4 provinces, he entered his warp spasm and had decimated his enemies' armies. Queen Maeve's numbers were still great, but severely reduced. They could not withstand another of Cú Chulainn's warp spasms. They would need to find a way to defeat the Hound, and fast. The only one in their collective who proved the equal in wit to Cú Chulainn was his fellow Ulsterman, Fergus MacRoke. Fergus had been the king of Ulster before King Concobar MacNassa, and although he had exiled himself in Connaught and now fought against Ulster, Cú Chulainn and he had always maintained a strong respect for each other. This had increasingly bothered Queen Maeve, who felt like Fergus was playing one side against the other. She was not entirely mistaken. But Maeve was also smart enough to know that her army would have already been defeated were it not for Fergus. To win him over even further, Maeve invited Fergus into her tent at night and seduced him into becoming her lover. Strange as it may seem, one who didn't have a huge problem with this was Maeve's own husband, Ailill. This whole affair had come about because of a quarrel he and Maeve had had over who had more possessions, and had now escalated into the bloodiest war the island of Éire had yet seen. Ailill was more keen than anyone for the war to be ended, so that he could go home and have his love and his life back. And the King of Connaught really put his money where his mouth was when he discovered that Fergus and his wife were lovers. It is not the love we share, Ailill thought to himself. Maeve has taken Fergus as her lover to win his loyalty. She is doing what she can to win the war. I will not allow jealousy to overpower my support. Such was the complex but trusting relationship between the King and Queen of Connaught. But once Cú Chulainn had entered his warp spasm and slaughtered so many of the collected forces, something changed in Ailill. He went to Maeve. The time has come for Fergus to earn the friendship of your thighs. Time for him to prove his loyalty. He must be the next to face Cú Chulainn. Fergus had said many times that he would never face the Hound of Ulster himself. Cú Chulainn was more than an Ulster man. He was Fergus's family. But Maeve agreed with her husband. She got Fergus drunk, bedded him, and questioned his manhood. Fergus MacRoke relented and agreed to fight Cú Chulainn. The next morning, Fergus met Cú Chulainn at the ford. When the Hound saw the former Ulster king approach, he felt a pang of sorrow. But this was soon followed by surprise, when he realized Fergus had come unarmed. "You are very brave to approach unarmed, friend Fergus," said Cú Chulainn. "Even if I had armed myself, it would have made no difference." "You're too self-effacing." "Not at all. It wouldn't have made a difference because I refused to take up arms against you." Cú Chulainn was touched in a way he didn't know possible. "So what do we do?" he asked. "I ask you to yield to me," said Fergus. Cú Chulainn considered this. "There will be more war to come," said the Hound, "and we may meet again in battle. I yield to you today, if you will yield to me when next we meet." "Of course I will." And for the first time ever, someone left a fight with Cú Chulainn with their life. Ailill and Maeve were incredulous to see Fergus return to the camp alive, much less without a scratch on him. "What happened?" demanded the Queen. "There was no winner," said Fergus curtly. "Then get back out there until there is," said Ailill. "I have faced Cú Chulainn in single combat, which is more than can be said for either of you. I will face him again when it is my turn. For now, find yourself another body." Ailill looked at Maeve and Maeve at Ailill. They knew there was nothing that could be said or done. They were all out of options. And with no options, they searched for the impossible. And in the impossible, they found their champion. Queen Maeve said to Ailill, "We must make Ferdia fight." Ferdia MacDamán was the greatest hero in Connaught. He was a direct descendant from the Fir Bolg, who had fought the Tuatha Dé Danann and taken Connaught after their defeat. He was the second greatest warrior in all of Éire. There was a time when he had been number one, and had gone to the Isle of Skye to train in combat with Scatach the Shadow. While under her tutelage, Ferdia met a younger boy also from Éire, who initially was assigned to clean and sharpen his swords, but who soon salmon leaped to equal and surpass the warrior of Connaught. This was, of course, Cú Chulainn. The two were equal in everything. They were as fast, as strong, and as keen. The only thing that could separate them was at the end of their training, Scathoch gave to Cú Chulainn the gay Bulga, the fatal spear made out of sea monster bone, which filled the body of its victim with deadly barbs. It might have been the Hound of Ulster's youth, or the fact that he had taken to bed Scathoch's daughter that was why he was awarded the gay Bulga over Ferdia. But to them it didn't matter. Neither Ferdia nor Cú Chulainn ever met again anyone who was their equal. They were friends. They were brothers. They may even have been lovers. But the two vowed to never, ever take up arms against the other. So when Queen Maeve mustered the armies of 4 provinces to take on Ulster and steal Dun Cúna, the brown bull of Cooley, Ferdia refused to fight alongside his fellow Connachtmen. He defied his queen, all because he knew if he went to Ulster, he would have to fight Cú Chulainn. But now, Queen Maeve was out of all other options. She had poets and bards and satirists go to where Ferdia lived and chant vicious satires and cruel rumours about his inferiorities as a man and as a warrior. But Ferdia was not so easily fooled. Maeve then invited Ferdia to come to a mighty feast of champions, held of course where she presently made camp, in Ulster. Ferdia knew what she was inviting him there to ask him to do, but did not refuse the offer of hospitality of his queen. Sure enough, when the Connaught hero arrived in Cooley and entered the queen's tent, a lavish and glorious feast was laid before him. There was no pretense. Maeve asked Ferdia, "Do you know why I've asked you to come?" Ferdia was not so blunt. "Why shouldn't I be here? I am the equal and better of any warrior here. You invited me to feast, so let's eat." "Very well," said Maeve. "My daughter Finnabar will serve you." Finnabar needed no introduction. She was the daughter of Ailill and Maeve, and the only woman in Connaught more desirable than her mother. She was the perfect combination of the fierce parents who had conceived her. Ferdia allowed the beautiful Finnabar to feed him wine long into the night until he was in a drunken, lustful stupor. Then Maeve said, "Ferdia, if you fight Cú Chulainn at the ford tomorrow, not only will I give you lands and riches greater than you could imagine, I will also give you the hand of Finnabar in marriage." "I would not accept your daughter as a prize." "Would that she were one," said Maeve. "But truth be told, hero of Connaught, you are the man my daughter has chosen of all the men in Éire, and I have introduced her to many. You are the love of her life. Whether you fight or not, Finnabar's heart is yours. But if you do fight the hound, you shall have her and my own friendly thighs too, if you want." "We've offered him our daughter. We needn't offer him you as well," cut in Ailill. "You are most generous, my queen," said Ferdia. "But even the heart of the jewel of Connaught, the gold of the Claddagh that is your daughter, could not make me fight my brother Cú Chulainn." But Maeve had one more illusion at play. "Then it is true what Cú Chulainn has said." "What did he say?" asked the half-believing Ferdia. "He said that you have become so old and weak that to defeat you would barely count as a victory." And in a toxic potion of the riches that had been offered, the wine he had drank and the beautiful young girl he had fallen for, Ferdia took this last comment to heart. He should not have said so. I have never fallen before him, and I shall not fall before him now. Everyone fears Cú Chulainn and his gay Bulga. Well, he was not the only one to receive a gift from Scathoch the Shadow. My horn-skinned armour can be pierced by no weapon. What will happen when an unstoppable blade meets an indestructible armour? We shall find out at the ford. And there was a mighty and deafening shout went up from all of Maeve's army gathered in that tent. When Fergus MacRoke saw what had happened, he sent word to Cú Chulainn that the next to fight him would be his own foster brother Ferdia. And when the hound's charioteer Laig told his master this, Cú Chulainn felt sadness he had not known since he had been forced to kill his own son. So Cú Chulainn decided that night he should not spend alone, with just his charioteer for company. For the first time since the outbreak of the Táin, Cú Chulainn returned home to Éamon Macha to spend the night with his beloved wife, Emer. "Why do you cry, McGraw?" asked Emer. "Do you fear this Ferdia?" "I do not fear him. I mourn him. Tomorrow my hand will be forced to kill my own best friend." And Emer held her husband's head in her arms and lulled him to sleep. The next morning, because Cú Chulainn had returned home, it was Ferdia who reached the ford first. When Cú Chulainn did arrive, he said, "You are welcome here, my brother Ferdia." "Well, it was me who was here first, so it is I who should welcome you, which I do not. There has been many a time when we have been welcome in each other's arms, but this war has made your heart hard and your brain soft, and today you fall for it. Ferdia, I don't know what that treacherous woman king of yours has told you. You will not disrespect my queen or my province any longer. She's offered ye Finnabar, hasn't she?" Ferdia was silent. "Words travels fast," the Connaught man said at last. "No," said Cú Chulainn. "Maeve has offered Finnabar to every warrior who has faced me so far, and I have discarded each like a bloodied rag. She even offered the poor child to me if I lay down my arms." Ferdia could see in the 1,000-yard stare of his beloved friend that what he was saying was true. But it was too late for that. He was at the ford now. They would have to fight. "Enough talk," said Ferdia. "It was never either our strong suits." "That's a lie and you know it," said Cú Chulainn. "You and I loved to tell stories on those long nights in Skye when we trained in arms with Scathach. A time when you were barely fit to clean my sword." This hurt Cú Chulainn. "We shall see who is the fighter and who the squire." "At last," said Ferdia. "Choose your weapon." "Oh no, you arrived at the ford first. It's your decision until sunset." "Very well. Let us use our great shields and our throwing spears." "Trying to keep a distance already," goaded Cú Chulainn. "A wise decision." "Fear not, Cú Chulainn. We'll be close soon enough." And Laig and Ferdia's charioteers armed their respective heroes with great shields big as writing desks, and with light, sharp spears capable of great distance and accuracy. That morning the single combat of Ferdia and Cú Chulainn began. They hurled spear after dagger across the ford like pagan darts players aiming past the bullseye to the one moving the dartboard. Neither ever missed. They always either hit the shield or grazed, cut or full-on stabbed their opponents. When sundown came, the two warriors rested. Cú Chulainn had the greatest healers and druids tend to his wounds, after which he sent them over to Ferdia. He would not have his friend die of wounds sustained in battle. In turn, as Ferdia fought for 4 provinces, he had the greatest food in Éire to eat, which he equally shared with Cú Chulainn. The single combat resumed at dawn, with both warriors rejuvenated. "Well, I had the choice yesterday," said Ferdia. "What will we fight with today?" "Let us fight with our stronger stabbing spears, and let us take to our chariots." So the horses were brought and the chariots yoked, and the second day's fight began. The chariots skimmed and bashed and crashed into each other, while spears swung and lunged and plunged deep into flesh. But when day was ended, there was still no winner. But the 2 horses were stable together, and the 2 charioteers slept by the same fire, and Cú Chulainn and Ferdia slept back to back. The next morning they were rested, but definitely not rejuvenated. "Your turn again, Ferdia," said Cú Chulainn. "No more distance, no more vehicles. Let us use our broadswords to take each other apart. You have already torn me apart, Ferdia, when you began this fight. Both heroes were armed with swords weighing the same as young tree trunks. They lifted and swung and hacked and slashed at each other with increasing cries and strains. Were they not as strong of flesh and muscle, each swing would have severed an entire limb. When the third day of single combat was done, both Cú Chulainn and Ferdia were severely wounded, unrecognisable from the blood and exposed flesh. And the weary fatigue of battle had got to both of them. That night, neither slept together, nor did their horses or charioteers. Something had changed. Ferdia awoke on the fourth morning and knew. This will be the day when one of us will fall. Cú Chulainn has yet to use the gay bulga. He will use it today unless I kill him first. Today I shall wear my impenetrable horn-skinned armour. And Ferdia was wrapped in his fearsome and indestructible suit of armour, which covered all except the vulnerable spot between his legs. So there, Ferdia tied a stone for protection. When Cú Chulainn saw Ferdia arming himself so completely, he did the same. The Hound of Ulster turned to his charioteer Laig and said, "If you see me losing today, Laig, you must goad and slag me, call me weak. But if you see me winning, you must call sweet words to me to cool my temper." "I will watch closely. Good luck, my friend," said the charioteer. When the two men met again, Ferdia said, "What will it be today, Cú Chulainn? Let us not decide on weapons, but let us fight in the waters of the ford." Ferdia was disheartened by this. It was in the ford waters that Cú Chulainn had defeated all of Maeve's forces who had faced him. "Very well," said Ferdia. And the two men began to wrestle in the waters. They pulled and tackled and plunged each other about like whale calves at play. With each passing moment, Cú Chulainn's rage began to grow. Ferdia saw this, and would flip and submerge him to cool his temper. But the third time he went under, the hound re-emerged like a Fomorian sea monster in his warp spasm. He was now twice the size and strength of Ferdia. "Be calm, my sweet lord," called Laig in vain, but it was too late. The furious Cú Chulainn drew sword and went for the kill. But the added size made Cú Chulainn a messier fighter, and Ferdia eventually saw his opportunity, and with tears in his eyes and pain in his heart, he plunged his sword deep into Cú Chulainn's chest. The Hound of Ulster collapsed into the water. "There is no choice," said Cú Chulainn to himself, and he called out, "Laig, the gay bulga!" And Cú Chulainn's devoted charioteer sailed the deadly spear down the river to his master. When Ferdia heard this, he grabbed his shield and went to cover his vulnerable area. With the javelin still in his hand, Cú Chulainn stabbed Ferdia in the heart. When the Connaught warrior went to defend his chest, Cú Chulainn felt the gay bulga reach his foot, and grasping it with his toes, launched it between Ferdia's legs, shattering the protective stone. The gay bulga filled Ferdia's body, bursting his organs, shattering his bones, until the Connaught hero collapsed into his beloved friend's arms. "It was not right that I have fallen by your hand, Cú Chulainn," said the dying Ferdia. "I know I was deceived by a desperate and ruthless queen. I am sorry I made you do this." "Do not apologize. All you have in this life is your own honour. That is worth fighting, if needs be, dying for. I love you, Hound of Ulster. I know." And Ferdia MacDamon, the greatest warrior in Connaught, died at the ford at the hands of his best friend. Cú Chulainn let out a mighty howl befitting the hound he was. It was all sport. It was all play, until Ferdia came to the ford. To be continued. Oh, wow. And that was the story of Ferdia at the Ford, part 5 of the Táin on Fireside. Oh, God. You'd be wrecked after that. That was an emotional one now. What an incredible piece, though. What an incredible story. You know, there's a lot... Cú Chulainn fights a lot of people in single combat in the Táin. You know, he's even fought a lot of people in single combat in the 4 parts so far that I've been doing, and he fights hundreds more that are very well described in the various novel length adaptations of the Táin, from Thomas Kinsella to Kieran Carson and beyond. And of course, naturally, it's going to get a little bit mundane because there's only so many ways to kill a man, especially with someone like Cú Chulainn, who you know is pretty much guaranteed victory. But the incredible thing about this fight with Ferdia is he genuinely is well matched. And even though you have the Deus ex gay Bulga looming over the entirety of the Táin, you know, you could make the storytelling protects itself. It has storytelling armor much more than you'd expect or even think necessary for a tale as old as this, because, you know, to a certain degree, logic can sometimes go out the window a little bit to a degree, or you have to explain things away with just kind of just cause, because to a certain degree, characters in folktales and mythologies aren't conscious, so they only do things when they need to do them, and it's less so about their motivation. But these two warriors who fight here, they're both incredibly motivated, and what I mean by the storytelling armor is that Cú Chulainn is given this weapon, this Deus Ex Machina of a weapon, the Gay Bulga, which can just defeat absolutely anyone with a single stroke. And he ends up having to use it for the first time on his own son. So for good reason, Cú Chulainn never wants to use the Gay Bulga again, and certainly doesn't want to use it against his best friend. But it's always there. He's always has it at his disposal. But this is given a bit more of a well match by the fact that Ferdia has this impenetrable armor, this horn-skinned armor which can't be pierced by any weapon. So even in Kinsella's Táin, you know, when Ferdia is made fight, it is referenced, you know, what about the Gay Bulga? And they say, well, it's fine because Ferdia has this. I don't know for sure that it was Scathoch who gave it to him, but I like to imagine that it was. I like to imagine that she knew that she, as a prophetess, which she was, that she could foresee that these two would eventually fight each other, and wanted to make them well matched by giving one an incredible, a fatal weapon, and the other an indestructible piece of armor. But I think the big discovery when my research of this time was something I'd never realized before. I don't know how, because it seems to be quite explicit in quite a few versions of this I've read across the internet and in my books, and that is, of course, that the Gay Bulga goes through Ferdia's crotch. That's where Cú Chulainn stabs him. You know, I kind of like to picture it as the kind of area in between. There are some versions that say that he literally does just stab him up the ass, which is a little too much for my liking. I like that it's this area that is so vulnerable and so unprotectable. But when there is such a strong eroticism between Cú Chulainn and Ferdia, which I didn't obviously overly go into, but I stated, and kind of I liked the idea of it being open-ended, and that's why we haven't heard too much about this relationship between them, the two of them so far, is that they regardless had this deep love and respect for each other, and they may or may not have been lovers. I mean, like, to my mind, it seems like they probably were, but then to have Cú Chulainn defeat his former lover by stabbing him in the ass just seems to take on an almost homophobic twinge at the end there. So I didn't want it to be that overt, but certainly this image of it going through that vulnerable area between the legs, between genitalia, sailing up through the body and cracking these ribs and bursting these organs. I mean, we really get to why this is such a bloodied and graphic tale whenever the gay bulga is used, particularly. And even the fact, the image of Ferdia tying the stone between his legs, knowing that it would be used. But just the sadness and the devastation of Cú Chulainn having to kill Ferdia. And there is a poem, because Kinsella's version, which I find myself just using more and more, I'm just finding that it's all there. You know, sometimes I look at other versions for a more condensed, sometimes it can be too detailed, and I have to take a step back and say, okay, what are the details that I need to tell this story? But Kinsella's is obviously, as I keep saying, very much the gospel. But it's written mostly in prose and then goes into verse, usually only in selective dialogue between characters. And towards the end of the chapter, after Cú Chulainn has slain Ferdia, and Laig, his charioteer, is trying to get him to come away from the battle because he knows that the entirety of the armies of Connaught and the 4 provinces will be coming for Cú Chulainn once they realise that Ferdia is dead. Cú Chulainn speaks these words: "It was all play, all sport, until Ferdia came to the ford. A like learning we both had, the same rights, the same belongings, the same good foster mother, her whose name is most honoured. All play, all sport, until Ferdia came to the ford. We had the same force and fury, and the same feats of war. Sciathach awarded 2 shields, one to me, one to Ferdia. All play, all sport, until Ferdia came to the ford. Misery! A pillar of gold I have levelled in the ford. The bull of the tribe herd, braver than any man. All play, all sport, until Ferdia came to the ford. Fiery and ferocious lion, fatal, furious flood wave. All play, all sport, until Ferdia came to the ford. I thought beloved Ferdia would live forever after me. Yesterday a mountain slope, today only a shade. I have slaughtered, on this Táin, 3 countless multitudes, choice cattle, choice men, choice horses, fallen everywhere. The army, a huge multitude that came from cruel Cruachan, has lost between a half and a third, slaughtered in my savage sport. Never came to the battlefield, nor did Banba's belly bear, nor over sea or land came, a king's son of fairer fame." I just thought that was beautiful, and that phrase, which I borrowed there at the end for my version, all sport, all play, until Ferdia came to the fore. That's really it for me. You know, you really see that this is the moment where all of Cú Chulainn's innocence is lost. You know, because this has been, as much as it's worn on him, and he is becoming weaker, and he certainly doesn't really ever recover from this battle. It's still ultimately because he has defeated everyone with such ease, except for when interfered by the Morrigan. It still has all remained sport and fun to him until he has had to face Ferdia. And there's just a great sadness to it and a sorrow to it. But going back to more the beginning of the story, we see this dynamic. We see more of this dynamic between Maeve and Alil and Fergus. Fergus, who is this constantly torn character fighting for Connaught, but not fully being able to betray Ulster. And we have him facing Cú Chulainn unarmed, and Cú Chulainn sparing him because he asks him to. And I love that is not something someone has ever tried, you know, that of just asking Cú Chulainn to yield to them, and Cú Chulainn having enough respect and knowing the way that the war is going, and that eventually this will be a war of 2 armies. It won't just be an army against one one person for very longer, that he says, if I spare you today, Fergus, you'll spare me in the future, which Fergus of course says, of course I'll do that. But we have this reference to Fergus being Maeve's lover, which he was indeed. I mean, Maeve, as the first queen outright of Connaught, uses to a huge degree in the Táin her sexuality and her body as a prize and as a power. She offers it right at the beginning to the farmer who owns the Brown Bull of Cooley to try and get the loan of it for the year. And what's more interesting still than that, than Maeve using her sexuality as such a powerful way of getting what she wants, is how open and okay Ailill is with all of it. There's a, in just what has survived is so much, I suppose, like patriarchal and all. It's such a potent word, but like, because it's so male focused, and you have you have not an eyelid batted when like Cú Chulainn takes many women on board, but like Emer, his wife, is expected to be loyal to him and to not take any other lovers, and he would never forgive her if she took on other lovers, but it's supposed to be fine when he does. It's quite refreshing to see Maeve have all the power here, and for Ailill to have the trust. It's an incredibly progressive relationship that they have, even by today's standards. You can imagine how progressive that would be seen by people who are in more open relationships and polyamorous relationships, is that Ailill is totally fine with his wife sleeping with other men for the sake of a battle strategy, and that this is her sword and shield. This is what she can use to win this war, and I think that's an incredible detail to this story. And poor old Finnabar I haven't really had a look into. She's been there for all of the story, but it is just the same thing. She is offered to every warrior who fights Cú Chulainn, and she doesn't really have much of a say in any of this, but I thought it worked better as a reveal when Cú Chulainn and Ferdia faced each other, that Cú Chulainn should be the one to tell Ferdia she's been offered to every man, it's not special, please don't do this. That dialogue between them, Cú Chulainn is so desperate for Ferdia to not fight, and Ferdia knows in his heart of hearts he shouldn't fight, but it was inevitable. His honour can only be called into question so much, and that's really what it boils down to, isn't it? That Ferdia is trapped. His hand is forced by his own name and honour. Eventually, you can only refuse to fight someone for long enough before it just seems like you're afraid of them. And at a time where your honour and your name was certainly all you had, I mean, you could say it's pretty much all you have now today, but definitely back then, where kings and queens were brought down by a bad word or a bit of satire, that Ferdia would be forced into this battle, knowing that if he didn't, he would lose it all. He would never be respected as a fighter again. And he's the second best warrior in Éire. If it wasn't for Cú Chulainn, he'd probably be the greatest warrior of all time. But alas, he fought and they died at the ford. But over these 3 days of combat, we see different weaponry, we see different tactics, and it really does seem like a well-matched fight. And even at the end, no one gets such a wound on Cú Chulainn as Ferdia does here. And it really looks like at the end that Ferdia has the upper hand before Cú Chulainn is forced to use the dreaded Gaebolga. So I'm going to wrap it up there. But that was part 5 of, I think next part 6 will be the finale, will be the final battle. What a journey it's been over these past few weeks. It's been so wonderful and so challenging to adapt this great story and from these great texts. So I hope you are enjoying them as much as I've been enjoying recording them. Thank you so much for listening. I don't think there's anything else really, just in terms of what I've been doing on the last couple of weeks. I was just on a short tour of Norway with Celtic Knights, the show I was touring America with. and it is such a beautiful country. It is a Norse country, it is a Viking country, and you really see where all of their mythology came from. And it was fantastic to perform there. It is definitely one of the most expensive places I have ever been, but I loved it and I look forward to going back. So I'm in Ireland for the next couple of months before I go away again. So look forward to doing more podcasts, doing more live shows, doing everything to take Fireside always to the next level. And I hope you'll join us on that journey. Thanks so much to Alan and Paddy here at Head Stuff. Thank you to Jamie, my producer, for continuing to edit this podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. Follow us on Instagram at Fireside Bard, all one word. Follow the Patreon at patreon.com/Fireside Podcast. Leave reviews, ratings on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And I'll see you all next time, and you'll hear me round the fireside. Goodbye.
This podcast is part of the Head Stuff Podcast Network.